Hi everyone, Alexandra here with Catholic Singles, and this is part two of the discussion with Julieanne Bartlett, who is an expert on prolonged singleness. And if you didn't check out part one, make sure to watch that first because this is going to be part two. In that discussion, we talked about what is prolonged singleness and some of the ways that you might be experiencing prolonged singleness, and some ways to heal from past traumas and wounds that may be keeping you single. So make sure to check that out first. And now we're on to part two. Enjoy. For those who have experienced or are experiencing prolonged singleness, what steps or tools do you recommend that can help them to get closer to meeting their spouse?
Sure. So two things I recommend is know that you're not going to be able to heal things that you'll heal in the marriage because
Mm,
um, I think a lot of people that try to minister to singles that were married super young um, say, you want to avoid this when you get to marriage. You really can't because you don't like the things that my marriage brought out in me. I didn't even know existed in me until I got
mm,
married.
mm.
Um, because marriage, nobody gets as close to you as your spouse, and that's like God. There's a great saying I read in the book, like marriage is like a big mirror that God gives you to show you who you are.
I love
And
that. So
it's re-
true,
it's
right?
really, yeah, really true, right?
Yes, for
Um,
sure.
and but what you can do is say to God, super, and it's none of us like to look at ourselves, like we really don't, right? Um, like ask God, say, please show me and help me root out anything that's keeping me from attaching to my suitable spouse.
Mm,
Because like I didn't know, and I didn't know that I couldn't receive anything good. And that was because marriage, God said marriage is very good. And so women today, and this is like I had a wound from my childhood, right? That couldn't receive anything good. But I think a lot of women today, from a societal lie, believe that they can't receive anything good because they might go on a date and feel like they have to go Dutch, like they
mhm.
can't. But really, women need to let the man pay because that is really the appropriate protocol. But women might feel like I can't let that happen. I have to pull my weight. So that's like an example of a wound, but
Right,
caused
right.
from society. So um, that could be, help root those things out, right?
Mhm.
Another example is pray, God, show me any barriers that I'm erecting that is limiting you bringing the suitable spouse to me. Like, do I
Mhm.
want certain looks? Do I want a certain salary? Um, do I want, them to have a certain degree? Like I'll share openly, my husband does not have a college degree and I have a law degree. Um, that was never an issue for us. My husband's been on his own since he was 13 years old, and he
Mm,
was supporting himself since he's been 13. He did not have the opportunity to go to college. But I can tell you wholeheartedly that um, my husband, like when something happens that I'm struggling with, like with myself or with other people, and I talk to him about it, he gives me insight that I could never come up with on my own. So women, I think, exclude men that God could have for them with these worldly qualifications and attributes. Like you have to trust God that God knows who you need.
mhm. And I love you mentioned a bit ago the suitable spouse because we have been, I think, trained in this society that there is that soulmate and that that person is perfect. And it's like, no, they're not going to be perfect. But I love that you said the suitable spouse. And another thing that you mentioned, and I'm saying this, I'm reiterating this back, is it sounds like some of those wounds stem from limiting beliefs. Again, some of those that we've learned from society or from our families or from whatever in our experiences and interactions. that some of those wounds, yeah, part of that healing is looking at those limiting beliefs, looking at those or perceptions or whatever views that we have. And is that keeping us from our suitable spouse because we're trying to have the perfection or whatever it is that we're seeking that may not be what God really wants for us?
Right, right. No, it's very true. It's very true. And like for the example for me, like I'll show you, like I was always like, I'm not gonna marry anybody who didn't have an annulment. But I was even like, I'm not even gonna marry somebody. Initially, I was like, I'm not even gonna marry somebody who has an annulment, because I was like, can I trust the Catholic Church that they gave an annulment? Like,
Mm,
so I even had that belief. And then God was like, had to really speak to me, like, no, the Catholic Church has the authority to grant annulments. And so I had to take that limiting belief away from myself. And then God even took me further and brought me a man who needed an annulment. And I was scared
mhm.
to go through the annulment process with somebody. And now we got my husband's annulment in 2 weeks. So
Wow,
it's, yeah,
it can
yeah.
be
So
done.
it can be
Depending on
done.
the circumstances, of course.
Yes, yes, God can do miracles.
Mhm,
And so that's why he, you know, we have to, of course I immediately got a priest involved in the situation. Um, but it's also the thing I see too, is that that's why it's very important to familiarize with what the Catholic Church allows. Um, because sometimes people are erecting um, standards, even from a religious perspective, that
mhm,
the church isn't even putting there. Like, they have to go to adoration every week, and they have to pray the rosary every day and do daily mass. Well, the amount of men that are going to do that in today's society is very small, and you might be limiting yourself out or missing out on men who would make a very good husband, and
mhm.
vice versa for the men out on a woman who would be a very good wife. And the
What
church
do you
doesn't require those things.
Right, and to that end, what do you see? You know, you mentioned some of these things that kind of might be limiting us. What do you think are maybe like the top one or two challenges that you're seeing with these singles that are experiencing prolonged singleness that's keeping them from getting married or finding their suitable spouse?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing is like um, the hope and despair issue. Um, that was true for me, and the that hope is the biggest issue, and so one, you can't live without hope. Hope is the very breath that is going to fuel your journey in this battle to get married. And hope really comes from knowing the truth of your call, of your calling to get married. But as like with any trial that you have in life, it's like a roller coaster, right? You have hope, you have despair, you have hope, you have despair. And so there's a requirement almost that you have to really like decide, like, I am going to fight this battle to get to marriage. I'm going to really seek God. I'm going to pray to know my what is prohibiting me, like my wounds, and I'm going to really study what the Catholic Church teaches about my vocation. And I'm not going to you know work on it. I'm not going to erect barriers. I'm going to limit my I'm not going to limit my beliefs. I'm going to do these things. And then I also encourage people to what I call team marriage, like to put together a team marriage, which is
Oh,
like, yeah, which is like a two or three people, only two or three you need, um, that absolutely believe in your married future. um, because I got to the point, like, you have so like people will, like, single people will talk to people, and then you might get back those sayings like, well, you don't need marriage, like, you have a really great career, or you might be called to be single, or and you don't need to hear that, like, so
mhm.
you want
Yes.
people who absolutely believe you can be married, like, so that when you are struggling and you're like the paralyzed man who had those friends who lowered him through the roof to put him in front of Jesus. Christ says in the scriptures that it was because of the faith of his friends that he
Right.
healed them. So
Mm-hmm.
we all need friends who can stand in the gap for us in those moments and lift us up. So you just need a couple friends who, when you're despairing, to go to them and they can remind you, like, that you're going to get married, that,
Mm-hmm.
that that God has that for you. And then the other thing, in addition to those beliefs, it's I don't, and some people I think struggle with this and some people don't. It's so that God wants you to admit that you want marriage. I think we have this independent culture,
Mm-hmm.
um, that it's not okay to say, but um, the fact that, I know some people who struggle with it, some people who don't. I never struggled with it. Um, but I know people who do, and the fact that there's this inner desperation, that is actually God speaking to you that it's his will for you to get married. So,
Mm-hmm.
so to deny it is only going to make you sicker.
Mm-hmm.
So go to God and be like, I really want marriage. And God will be like, I've been waiting for you to say this.
Wow. And on both of those points, one other thing I've been noticing, because I've been speaking to hundreds of people, different ages, and but usually I found with women, um, that around the mid 40s, like 45-ish,
Hmm.
that the conversations I'm having with them, almost not everyone, but starts to get into that hopeless, and they're like, well, whatever, if it happens, it happens. It's almost like then they start to say, oh, well, maybe marriage isn't for me, and maybe they don't even want to say, I want marriage. And I think that you're giving so many people hope that, one, there is a suitable spouse for you, right? I think that if we wanted, but especially when you get to that, around that age, that probably you would have already chosen, if you wanted to be religious, chosen religious life. Maybe not, but for the most part, if you really deep down, like, it's okay to, like you said, to say that you want marriage, even if
Yes.
it's not happening for you
Yes.
yet, or it hasn't happened for you yet. So I love those 2 points that you make, because I have seen both of those things starting to happen around that mid 40 range for women. Men has been a little bit different. I think men maybe have less of that time pressure, and so I've seen it a little differently for men. But so for the people who are experiencing prolonged singleness, who do want to get married, what would you say? Like, what's maybe like your top advice that you would give them to help them through this period?
Sure, sure. I think the biggest, there's so many things that are required in the journey to marriage, but the biggest thing is to know the truth of your calling. You know how in the world they always say, knowledge is power. So,
Hmm.
but here it's, knowledge is grace. So if you don't know what the Catholic Church actually teaches, I've seen two things. One, the world has moved into the church rather than the church actually going out and impacting the world. So
Hmm.
we have, what's happened, like with this singles versus marriage thing, is the world has come in and been like, well, you have a career or you're called to be single. No, that is the world speaking to you, and you have to actually go in yourself. I always tell people, don't even take my my word for it. I'm telling you where the scriptures are, and I'm telling you where the sections of the Catholic Catechism are. Go look at it for yourself. I never trust what people tell me. I go, once I hear it from someone, I go look at it for myself, because I'm accountable for myself to know what the church teaches. Um, and and then also, the Protestant churches have moved into the Catholic Church, and people have become Protestantized. And
Hmm.
I'm saying that because people have to remember that Martin Luther and John Calvin, have they broke off from the church, and so they are not under that protected doctrine. So a lot of times people come in and they'll say like, well, I can't be unequally yoked, right, with my spouse. And that is very true that St. Paul said that, but you also need to look at what the Catholic Church allows. Like,
Mm.
so they're like, I have to have someone who, goes to mass, daily mass every day, and I have to have someone who, goes to adoration, and I have to do this because I can't be unequally yoked. But the Catholic Church, and this is all laid out in the sections 1633 through 1637 of the Catholic Catechism, you can marry what's called a baptized non-Catholic, which would be someone from another Christian religion, which I actually did have to have that specific permission because my husband was a non-denominational um, believer at the time of our marriage, which he did a year later come into the Catholic Church, which was totally a gift from God because I never asked him to do that. Um, and you also can marry a non-believer. The Catholic Church um, gives a special dispensation for that. And that is laid out in those sections also. And it says that because of some of the countries we live in. And I
Mm.
think Catholics need to recognize that we live in a post Christian culture. And part of being open to who your suitable spouse is not leaving anything, not taking anything off the table, because ultimately you want who God has for you. And if you're like, well, I'm not going to have that. Well, how do you know that's not who God has for you? Like, marriage is like, you might work for an unbeliever. So if you're going to stand on the unequally yoked thing, do you work for an unbeliever? Do you buy your food from an unbeliever? Like,
Mm.
so then you might as well go across the whole board with that. So if you're going to do it for marriage, because the Catholic Church has the authority to grant those dispensations. So
And not
familiar
taking
guys,
that equally yoked so literally, like that it has to be with so many things either. Because I think that you get into that perfect
ex-
spouse rather than the suitable spouse. I think you people are
yes,
taking it way too far when you start getting
yes,
so rigid about it.
right. And see, I have a very good friend of mine married an unbeliever, and they've been married for over 20 years, and um, that marriage has. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but no, I'm not saying it's going to be easy marriage, but no marriage is easy. And um, it requires grace regardless of what marriage you're in. And um, it gets great. My friend says it takes grace to get married and it takes grace to stay married. And as long as you're growing closer to Christ in your marriage, that's the key.
Hmm.
So,
And and I'm just going to make a point here because I know I've talked about this. So I was engaged at one point, and he was an evangelical non-Catholic, and I was actually willing to not get married in the church at the time, and this was long time ago. And so for me now, I am looking for a Catholic spouse. However, what you're saying is, you don't want to necessarily, like, if you're trying and trying and trying and your views are so rigid and it's not working for you, maybe it's time to open up a little bit and
right,
see who God is actually putting in front of you. Like, obviously that didn't work. So I know God didn't have him for me, but
right.
maybe somebody else, for me is not going to be who I think God has for me. God has for me who God thinks is the best for me, who's the most suitable spouse.
Exactly. And also, just to confirm and clarify, like, if God has someone for you that's a like you or you in general, that, like, for me at the time was not a Catholic, um, was a non-denominational Christian, I still married in the Catholic Church. I got the so
Good,
that you
yeah.
have a sacramental marriage. I got the requisite dispensation, and like, even my friend who married an unbeliever, she got married in the Catholic Church.
Very
So
important that made that clarified, right? Because
yes,
it has to
yeah,
going back to sacramental marriage. Absolutely.
yes.
Thank you
So
for
you
clarifying that point.
yes, yeah, you always want to be in obedience to the church, because in being in obedience to the church, you're being in obedience to God. And
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and so and then you have a sacramental um, marriage, and as both her husband and my husband at the time had to commit to the priest, to the church, to never hinder us from practicing our faith, and that if any children are born of the marriage, that they had to be raised Catholic. And
Mm-hmm.
both my husband and her husband did that. My husband, since a year after we got married, came into the church. And I will tell you that my friend's husband goes to church with her every Sunday. Even though he's still not a believer, he goes to church with her every Sunday. So you don't know what God's will is. Um,
Right. That's a wonderful point. Oh, that's amazing.
yeah.
And
So
I love that. So you obviously are such an amazing mentor. And like we talked about earlier, singles need mentors. I wrote down, you said the team marriage, maybe you mentor or a coach or a therapist, people who can help provide some resources and tools can be part of that, that group for you. So, what I know that you have a mentorship group. Can you share a little bit more about that?
sure, sure. So I do individual mentoring with people. And then I also just this year started what I call prolonged singleness encouragement group. And we
Mhm.
meet on the last Sunday of each month. So we've had 3 meetings so far. And there's no meetings in April or December because of Easter and Christmas. And so the whole point is to not for people to stay single, it's to give tools for people to, I can't get you married, but I can encourage you and give you tools to seek God to help you get married, because He's the one who
Mhm.
ultimately gets people married. And so it's a couple things. We're basing it on the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land, right? Um, and Egypt is like prolonged singleness, and obviously marriage is the Promised Land. But we all
Mhm.
have to go through the desert. We'd all like to spiritually, what they call spiritual bypass. We'd all like to spiritually bypass the desert. Doesn't happen. So, um, and we also are going to have guest speakers. Just this past Sunday, one of the women who mentored me spoke. We're also going to have a couple other guest speakers of people who overcame prolonged singleness, and they're going to share their stories. Um, it's an open enrollment. Anybody who would like to join um, can, and I do after meeting notes, so they can get the notes and the handouts from the previous meetings so they can come up to date as well. So
Awesome, wonderful. And I know you mentioned the book, and is that all those resources available on your website?
sure, sure. The book has not been published yet. It's actually
Oh, okay.
being reviewed by my diocese for a Neil
Mhm.
Hill Upstott. So, so as soon as I get that back, I'll hopefully have and be able to give a release date. So
Perfect, wonderful. And when it is, send it to me. I'll make sure to include it in the notes in the description as well. That's wonderful. And so
definitely,
your website is passionofhope.com
yes, it is. Yeah, and I have a freebie on there as well too, and people can follow me on Instagram. So
is also Passion of Hope, correct? At
correct.
Passion of Hope.
Yes. Yep.
Wonderful. So, I mean, this has been just so much of a wealth of information. I've learned a lot. I took my own notes too,
Oh,
even though I was trying to pay attention, but I took my own notes. Is there anything else, like a final parting thought that you'd like to share with the listeners?
know that this is a real struggle, and it's you're not alone, and you want to find, even if people don't work with me, find somebody who went through prolonged singleness and got to marriage and ask them to help you. There's people out there who have overcome this, and it is a real battle, and don't be afraid to fight it. It's a real trial. It's up there with financial distress, a major illness, everything. It's even though society will tell you it's not a real battle, it is a real battle, and God really does want to help you get into the vocation. So, be encouraged.
Mm. Well, I was encouraged. I'm sure the listeners have been encouraged listening and inspired by your story as well. You can check out Julieanne at passionofhope.com. She's got one-to-one mentoring and the group encouragement group, support group, which sounds amazing. I hope to join it, the coming ones coming later in May. And yes, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. And I know that the listeners are going to get amazing inspiration and motivation from your story and what you've shared today. Thank you, Julianne.
Oh, thank you so much, Alexandra. I was so happy to be here.
If you like this video, please make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more tips and strategies to help you date intentionally toward holy matrimony. And as always, God bless. Bye.